Back, everybody. This is Family Time 237. We're talking about stress. Stress often has a negative connotation, but we need stress. Stress is important. Stress is just anything that elicits a response. And we need stress to learn and grow, to adapt. Stress is important. I've drawn this and talked about this many times before, but this is a bell curve, and stress and performance exists on a bell curve, where the idea is as you increase stress, at least initially, our performance is going to go up. We need some stress for our performance to be at a high level. But if we go too far, the performance declines. And I've talked about this. Lifting weights is an easy example to understand, even if you're not someone who lives in that world. But if I take somebody and let's say your max bench press right here in the top of the curve, your peak performance is 225 pounds. If that's your max bench press, and I want to get you to a higher bench press, that's our goal in this scenario, is to increase your bench press. We have to have enough stress to elicit an adaptation, right? In strength and conditioning, it's called the SAID method, specific adaptation to impose demand. Okay, what that means is if you're 225 bench, and let's say we're doing 3 sets of 3, and I have you put 135 on the bar, that's really not going to be enough for 3 reps. That's not enough resistance. It's not enough stress for you to gain much strength. On the flip side, if I want to increase your bench, I'm like, okay, we'll just put 315 on the bar. That's going to be too much stress. You're not going to be able to do the rep. What we have to do is we have to live in this area most of the time, where some of our reps are going to be something that we can handle. A lot of our reps are going to be something that we're going to be able to do and not fail. Every once in a while, we're going to go we have to go past the point of what we can currently do. We have to get to a point of failure sometimes. Not so much so that we're going to risk injury, but we have to go to that point of failure. We have to go beyond our current abilities. Then what happens is, it's a little hard to see on there, I have that dotted line, is that eventually our bell curve moves to the right, and something that was once beyond our ability becomes the norm for us, becomes something that's just part of our routine, something that we can handle pretty easily. That's how life works. Is we only get stronger, we only adapt by being uncomfortable. Again, not to the point where we're overwhelmed, where we risk injury physically, mentally, emotionally, but we have to have enough discomfort, and that discomfort has to be regular enough for us to adapt, for us to grow. It's the same thing in class, it's the same thing in sports, it's the same thing in relationships, it's the same thing in life, is we have to get a little bit uncomfortable. It's this tough balance to strike sometimes, because it's built into us to want to seek comfort, to want to seek safety, but that's a trap, because if we seek too much safety, we risk greater pain later. It's always the choice. Life is painful. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's part of the existence of life. But we do have some choice in the pain that we take on. We can either choose the pain of making ourselves uncomfortable, developing discipline, developing skills, because that is painful, or we have to incur the pain of not having those skills, of not having that discipline, of not having the life that we want. And that's even more painful. And when we sometimes try to avoid what's uncomfortable, I think of Alan Watts. Alan Watts is an interesting figure who kind of brought a lot of Eastern philosophies to the Western world, Buddhism, Taoism, things like that. And he talked about if you were able to dream your perfect life and it would be reality, that probably initially you would dream up a life of no pain, no discomfort, no challenges. And it might be okay for a little while, but eventually you'd get bored because there was nothing to strive for. You're not learning anything, you're not growing. And growth is an essential part of life. If we stop growing, we start dying. So eventually, in this dream, you would start thinking up little challenges, right? You'd start thinking up little obstacles to overcome. But when you did that, when you met an obstacle and you learned something and you got stronger, you'd enjoy that. There's a lot of pride in that, and there's a visceral feeling of accomplishment when you do those things. And we would want that. We'd start to desire those things. So then we'd add a little more. We'd add another obstacle. We'd add some bigger challenges. And essentially we'd be doing what we need to do that for that bell curve is we're starting to get more adaptation. We're getting stronger. And we like that feeling of learning and growing and being more than we were before. And eventually what we wind up with is something pretty close to what we have right now in our actual lives. Like, we're probably not going to dream up the most crushing, painful things of all time to happen every day. Maybe once in a while we'd want something really difficult to overcome. And we'd want a balance. So that's I think an important thing to understand with balancing those challenges and balancing the stress in our lives is understanding we kind of already have the dream here. We have that balance of there's good days and bad days, and there's challenges, and there's rewards and all these sorts of things. And we have to accept that as a big part of the experience and recognize how gifted we are, even with challenges. And recognize that if you have a challenge that feels overwhelming right now, we just need to keep working to develop those skills to adapt to that level. And sometimes it is tough. Sometimes we get more thrust upon us than we're ready for. It's kind of like the getting thrown in the deep end and seeing if we can swim. But if we're still here and we're still breathing, then we have the opportunity to keep learning and growing. So we're going to talk about that this week, talk about some stressors in your life, how we can use those things to adapt. Until next time, much love.